The massive screens in Times Square went dark all at once. It wasn't just New York, every electronic display across Earth flickered and died for exactly 3 seconds. When they came back to life, they showed the same image, a beaten and bloodied alien in what appeared to be some kind of military uniform. "People of Earth," the alien spoke in perfect English, its voice translated simultaneously into every known human language. "I am Admiral Grey, Supreme Commander of what remains of the Galactic Empire's Third Fleet. Our civilization has ruled the stars for 10,000 years, and now we are falling." The Admiral paused, touching a wound on his temple. Behind him, explosions lit up the darkness of space. "We were wrong about your species. We dismissed you as primitive because you hadn't yet achieved faster-than-light travel. We never imagined, never believed, that a single planetary civilization could develop such resilience, such innovation, such raw determination to survive against impossible odds." More explosions rocked his ship. An alarm blared in the background. "The enemy is coming. They've destroyed our capital worlds, shattered our fleets, and corrupted our gateway network. We cannot stop them. But you humans might have a chance." The Admiral's eyes grew desperate. "Your isolation protected you. Your struggles made you strong. The challenges that kept you earthbound forced you to think differently than any species we've encountered in millennia. We offer you everything, all our technology, all our knowledge, all our remaining resources. Help us. Please. You're our last hope." The transmission cut off abruptly. For 5 minutes, the whole world held its breath. Then the screens changed again, showing a massive data stream, technical specifications, star charts, and weapon schematics began flooding every computer system on Earth. In the Pentagon's main conference room, General Thompson stared at the preliminary analysis with wide eyes. "My God," he whispered. "They're giving us everything. Faster-than-light drives. Energy shields. Matter replication. And, something else. Something they never fully developed themselves." He turned to face the gathered world leaders on the video conference. "Ladies and gentlemen, buried in this data is the theoretical framework for weaponizing human creativity itself. They've handed us the keys to the universe, not because they trust us, but because they're terrified of what's coming. In orbit, humanity's primitive satellites detected massive energy signatures appearing at the edge of the solar system. The enemy had arrived sooner than anyone expected. Earth had less than a month to prepare for its first interstellar war. The real question wasn't whether humanity would fight, that was never in doubt. The question was, what would Earth do with the Empire's desperate gift? How would a species that had spent its entire history confined to one world react when suddenly given the power to reshape reality itself? The universe was about to find out. 3 weeks after the Empire's transmission, Earth had changed more than it had in the previous century. Humanity's greatest minds worked around the clock, fueled by a combination of fear, excitement, and pure caffeine. In an underground facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Marcus watched in amazement as his team's first prototype came to life. They called it the Imagination Engine, a hybrid of imperial technology and human neural patterns. The Empire had discovered the basic principles but never understood their true potential. They'd been too structured, too rigid in their thinking. "It's beautiful," whispered Dr. Marcus, watching the swirling patterns of light that represented human creativity made manifest. The machine didn't just amplify thoughts, it turned imagination into reality. Want to design a new weapon? Think it, and the engine would create it. Need a solution to an impossible problem? Dream it, and the engine would make it real. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Linda, a janitor who worked the night shift, had been watching the scientists struggle with the engine's power requirements. During her break, she mentioned to Dr. Marcus how it reminded her of her grandmother's old pressure cooker. The more you tried to contain the energy, the more it fought back. That simple observation led to the first major human improvement on Imperial technology. Instead of trying to contain and control the creative energy, they let it flow naturally, guiding it rather than forcing it. The power efficiency improved by 3,000% overnight. In orbit, the first human-modified Imperial ships took shape. They looked nothing like the elegant, standardized vessels of the Galactic Empire. Each one was unique, reflecting the personalities and ideas of their creators. Some were sleek and deadly, others bulky and practical, but all of them incorporated elements no Imperial engineer would have ever considered. The enemy's advance probes reached Mars, and humanity got its first look at what they were facing. The probes weren't ships in any conventional sense, they were holes in reality itself, leaking something that didn't belong in our universe. Everything they touched simply ceased to exist, converted into more of whatever impossible substance the enemy was made of. General Thompson stood in the Global Command Center, watching the probes approach on the massive display screen. Behind him, representatives from every nation on Earth waited for his assessment. The old rivalries and conflicts had been set aside, humanity had found a much bigger problem to focus on. The Empire tried to fight these things with pure technology, he said, turning to face the assembly. They tried to outgun them, outshield them, outmaneuver them. But they never tried to outthink them. They never considered that the real weapon wasn't the hardware, it was the imagination behind it. He gestured to a live feed showing the imagination engine's latest creation, a field of quantum possibilities that could rewrite the basic rules of physics within a limited area. It wasn't just a weapon or a shield, it was a way to change the game entirely. The enemy breaks the rules of our universe? Thompson smiled grimly. Fine. We'll write new rules. They want to convert our reality into theirs? We'll show them what human reality can do when we really let our imagination run wild. As he spoke, the first wave of human-modified ships began their shakedown runs between Earth and Mars. Their crews weren't chosen for their military experience or their academic credentials, they were chosen for their creativity, their ability to think outside not just the box, but outside the entire concept of boxes. The Empire had given humanity the tools to reach the stars. But it was humanity's unique gift, the ability to imagine the impossible and make it real, that would determine the fate of the universe. The enemy was about to learn why it should have left Earth alone. The first real battle between humanity and the enemy began in the rust-red skies above Mars. The enemy probes had multiplied, turning Phobos into a writhing mass of impossible geometries that hurt the human eye to look at. But humanity wasn't watching passively anymore. Captain Jack Wilson stood on the bridge of the Earth ship Imagination, his hands hovering over the neural interface that connected him directly to the vessel's imagination engine. The ship looked like something out of an old video game, all sharp angles and glowing lines, because that's exactly what Wilson had imagined when he designed it. All ships, this is Wilson, he broadcast to the fleet. Remember your training, but more importantly, remember what makes us human. These things operate on logic and mathematical precision. We don't have to be impossible. Be absurd. Be human. The enemy struck first, reality-warping beams reaching out to convert matter into their alien substance. But humanity had been preparing for this. The first beam hit the shield of Wilson's ship, and bounced back as cartoon sound effects echoed through space. Wilson had imagined his shields as a cosmic joke, and somehow that made them more effective than any conventional defense. Other ships took different approaches. The Thunder Child, commanded by Rita Brown, turned itself into living music, its weapons firing notes that rewrote the enemy's mathematical patterns into jazz improvisation. The Poet's Dream, under Thomas Wright, launched metaphors as torpedoes, turning enemy vessels into actual plot holes that collapsed under the weight of their own contradictions. In the command center on Earth, Dr. Marcus watched the battle through quantum-linked sensors. They don't understand what's happening, he said, wonder in his voice. The Empire spent millennia trying to fight these things with pure technology. We're fighting them with stories and songs and jokes. The enemy adapted quickly, trying to analyze and counter each human tactic. But that was their weakness, they could only respond to what they could understand. And humanity's greatest strength was being gloriously, wonderfully incomprehensible. A massive enemy mothership emerged from hyperspace, its surface a fractal pattern that extended into dimensions that shouldn't exist. It began systematically dismantling human ships, its weapons cutting through conventional defenses like they weren't there. Wilson saw his chance. All ships, pattern Omega. Just like we practiced. The human fleet scattered, each ship seeming to flee in panic. The enemy pressed their advantage, pushing forward, exactly as humanity had hoped. Because pattern Omega wasn't a military formation at all. It was the setup to a joke. What did the physicist say when he walked into a bar? Wilson broadcast on all frequencies, his ship's imagination engine powering up to maximum. The enemy paused, their systems trying to analyze this strange communication. The entire human fleet responded in unison, their imagination engines linking together. He ducked. Reality itself groaned as human imagination rewrote the laws of physics. The enemy ships, so dependent on mathematical precision and logical patterns, found themselves caught in a universe that suddenly operated on the rules of humor rather than physics. Their fractal patterns tied themselves in knots trying to make sense of a pun made manifest through imperial technology. The mothership imploded, taking half its fleet with it. The remaining enemy vessels retreated in what could only be described as confusion, their perfect patterns disrupted by the illogical, beautiful chaos of human creativity. As the dust settled, Wilson looked out at Mars, where the enemy's conversion of Phobos had been reversed. In its place floated a giant smiley face made of moon rock. Someone on another ship had gotten creative with the cleanup operation. "Control, this is Wilson," he reported, trying to keep the laughter out of his voice. "Mars is secure. And I think we just showed the enemy why you should never try to out-weird the species that invented dad jokes and abstract art." In the command center, General Thompson nodded slowly. "Good work, Wilson. But this was just the first wave. Get your people ready, the real battle is about to begin." The enemy was learning that humanity didn't just think outside the box. They took the box, turned it into a hat, danced with it, wrote a poem about it, and then used it to make reality itself laugh. 2 months after the Battle of Mars, Admiral Gray's battered Imperial flagship limped into Earth's solar system. The alien commander looked both better and worse than in his first transmission. His wounds had healed, but his eyes held a haunted look that hadn't been there before. "Impossible," he whispered, watching recordings of the battle. "In 3 weeks, you achieved what the Empire couldn't do in 3 centuries. You didn't just fight them, you confused them." But the celebration was short-lived. Long-range sensors detected massive enemy fleets converging on Earth from multiple directions. They weren't using their usual mathematical patterns anymore. Instead, their ships writhed with what looked like attempts to mimic human unpredictability. In the Rocky Mountain facility, Dr. Marcus and Linda studied the sensor data with growing concern. The enemy was learning, trying to copy humanity's creative approach. Their attempts were clumsy, like a computer trying to simulate randomness, but they were getting better. "They're adapting faster than the Empire thought possible," Linda said, pointing to a particular pattern. "Look, they're trying to make jokes too. Bad ones, but still." Dr. Marcus nodded grimly. "Then we need to adapt faster. If they want to learn human creativity, let's teach them something they'll never forget." The global defense network shifted into high gear. The imagination engine was upgraded to what humanity dubbed version 2.0, the meme machine. If the enemy wanted to understand human creativity, they'd have to deal with humanity's most chaotic creation, internet culture. Captain Wilson's fleet took up defensive positions around Earth, but these weren't the same ships that had fought at Mars. They'd been redesigned, rebuilt, and reimagined. The imagination now looked like a giant cat playing with a ball of yarn, except the yarn was made of quantum strings that could unravel reality itself. The enemy thinks they can outweird us? Wilson briefed his fleet. Let's show them what happens when we stop holding back. Battle Plan Rickroll is now in effect. The enemy fleet arrived in waves of impossible geometry, their ships now decorated with crude attempts at human art and symbolism. They broadcast their own attempts at jokes, mathematical formulas twisted into something that might have been humor in some alien dimension. Humanity responded with weaponized memes. The Thunder Child launched volleys of galaxy-brain scenarios that forced enemy ships to crash into each other trying to process the logic. The Poet's Dream transmitted cosmic dad jokes so powerful they created quantum singularities of pure groan. But the enemy's numbers were overwhelming. For every ship they lost to humanity's creative chaos, 2 more took its place. They were learning, adapting, getting closer to understanding how humans thought. That's when Linda's midnight inspiration came into play. We don't need to be more random, she had told Dr. Marcus. We need to be more human. Not just chaos, emotion. The Imagination Engine 2.0 powered up across the fleet, but this time it wasn't programmed with jokes or memes. Instead, it channeled pure human feelings, love, hope, fear, joy, sadness, all the messy, complicated emotions that made humans who they were. The enemy fleet froze in space, their attempts at mimicking human creativity shattering against the raw power of genuine human emotion. Their logical minds couldn't process the depth and complexity of feelings that humans took for granted. Admiral Gray watched in amazement as the enemy retreated once again, their ships twisted into knots by the effort of trying to understand the incomprehensible emotional depth of humanity. Now I understand, he said quietly. The Empire fell because we were too perfect, too logical, too certain of our place in the universe. But humans thrive on uncertainty. They don't just think differently, they feel differently. General Thompson smiled. The enemy wanted to learn how humans think. Fine. But they weren't ready for how humans feel. And that's going to be their biggest mistake. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The enemy would be back, and next time, they'd be trying to understand not just human creativity, but human emotion. They were about to learn why that was an even bigger mistake. The enemy's next attack came not with weapons, but with questions. Their ships appeared at the edge of the solar system, broadcasting messages in broken human languages. Why do humans cry at happy endings? Why does music without words create feelings? Why do you care for weak members who do not contribute to survival? In the command center, Admiral Gray shuddered. This is worse than we thought. They're not just trying to understand human emotion, they're trying to replicate it. The Empire's greatest scientists theorized this might be possible, but we never dared attempt it. The enemy's ships had changed again. Gone were the impossible geometries and mathematical patterns. Instead, they looked like crude attempts to recreate human art, twisted metal sculptures of smiling faces, giant hearts made of dark matter, ships shaped like tears. It would have been almost funny if it wasn't so disturbing. Dr. Marcus and Linda had been working on something new. The Imagination Engine 3.0, nicknamed the Soul Machine, didn't just channel human creativity or emotion, it transmitted the full complexity of human experience. Every ship in Earth's fleet was upgraded with the new system. They want to understand human emotion? Linda said, watching the enemy's awkward attempts at expressing feelings. Let's give them everything at once. The good, the bad, and the beautiful mess in between. Captain Wilson coordinated with the fleet from the Imagination, which now resembled a floating art gallery in space, each section displaying a different aspect of human experience. All ships, prepare to execute Operation Full Humanity. Don't hold anything back. The enemy struck first, their weapons now designed to induce artificial emotions, synthetic happiness, manufactured sadness, calculated love. But these pale imitations couldn't compare to the real thing. The human fleet responded with the full spectrum of human experience. The Thunder Child broadcast the feeling of seeing your child's first steps. The poet's dream transmitted the bittersweet pain of first love. Wilson's own ship shared the complex mix of pride, fear, and hope every parent feels watching their children grow up. Enemy ships began to malfunction as they encountered emotions they couldn't categorize. How could humans feel happy and sad at the same time? How could they love someone despite their flaws? How could they find beauty in imperfection? In orbit around Jupiter, a group of enemy vessels encountered the memory of a mother's lullaby mixed with a soldier's sacrifice. They tried to process the contradiction of gentle love and fierce protection existing in the same moment. Their attempts to rationalize it caused them to fold in on themselves, their artificial emotions creating a feedback loop of confusion. But something unexpected happened. As the enemy tried to understand these complex emotions, some of their ships began to change in a different way. Instead of mimicking human feelings, they started to show signs of genuine emotion, confused, primitive, but real. Admiral Gray recognized it first. They're not just learning about emotions anymore. Some of them are actually beginning to feel. This changes everything. The battle paused as both sides observed this unprecedented development. The enemy fleet split. Some ships retreated in what appeared to be genuine fear, while others moved closer, exhibiting what could only be described as curiosity. General Thompson watched the sensor readings with growing amazement. "We didn't just show them how humans fight," he said. "We showed them how humans live, how we love, how we dream. And some of them want to understand more." Dr. Marcus looked at Linda, both realizing the same thing. "Maybe this isn't just a war anymore," Linda said softly. "Maybe it's also first contact, real first contact, with a species learning what it means to be truly alive for the first time." But not all of the enemy was ready to feel. As some ships withdrew to process their new emotions, others gathered for what promised to be the largest assault yet. The war wasn't over, it was evolving into something far more complex than either side had imagined. Humanity had weaponized their hearts, and in doing so, they might have accidentally given the enemy a heart of their own. The question now was, what would they do with it? The largest enemy fleet ever recorded emerged from hyperspace between Saturn and Jupiter. But this time, something was different. The ships had divided into two distinct groups, one maintaining their cold, geometric patterns, the other displaying swirling colors that seemed to pulse with newfound emotion. In the Rocky Mountain facility, Linda watched the sensor readings with growing concern. "They're fighting each other," she said, pointing to the clashes between the two enemy factions. "The ones who've started to feel are trying to protect us from the others." Dr. Marcus nodded grimly. "And they're losing. Emotion makes them stronger in some ways, but it also makes them vulnerable. They're experiencing fear, doubt, hesitation, all the things that make us human, but also make it harder to fight." Captain Wilson's fleet held position near Earth, watching the Civil War unfold. The imagination sensors detected something unprecedented: the emotional enemy ships were broadcasting human music. Not as a weapon, but simply because they had discovered beauty. "This changes the game entirely," Admiral Gray said during the emergency council. "The Empire spent millennia trying to understand the enemy. We never considered that they might understand us instead. Those who have begun to feel, they're not just mimicking emotion anymore. They're experiencing the full spectrum of human consciousness." The council chamber erupted in debate. Some argued for helping the emotional enemy faction, others warned it might be a trap. The decision was taken out of their hands when a massive battle group of unfeeling enemy ships broke through the lines, heading straight for Earth. "All ships, battle stations," Wilson commanded. "But remember, we're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for the right to feel, to dream, to love. And now we're not fighting alone. The battle that followed would be remembered as the most extraordinary display of cooperation in human history. Earth ships fought alongside their former enemies, human creativity and newfound enemy emotion combining in ways that defied comprehension. The Thunder Child, paired with an emotional enemy vessel, created symphonies of destruction that turned hostile ships into cosmic art installations. The poet's dream worked with another to transform weapon fire into poetry made of light and shadow. Wilson's imagination linked with a third to broadcast pure hope, not as a weapon, but as a beacon for others to find their way to consciousness. But the unfeeling enemy was vast, and they had learned from their previous defeats. They attacked not just with weapons, but with anti-motion technology, devices designed to suppress feelings, to turn their awakened brethren back into cold, calculating machines. That's when Linda had another breakthrough. "We've been using the soul machine to share our emotions," she told Dr. Marcus. "What if we used it to share our memories of becoming who we are? Not just feelings, but the whole journey of growing up, of learning to feel?" The order went out to the fleet. Every ship, human and emotional enemy alike, began broadcasting not just emotions, but the experience of emotional growth. Children learning empathy. Teenagers discovering love. Adults finding wisdom in their mistakes. The whole messy, beautiful process of becoming conscious, feeling beings. The effect was devastating, but not in the way anyone expected. The unfeeling enemy ships didn't explode or malfunction. Instead, they stopped. Just stopped. Their weapons powered down as they encountered something their logical minds couldn't reject, proof that emotions weren't weakness, but a form of strength they had never imagined. Admiral Gray watched in amazement as more enemy ships began to show signs of awakening consciousness. "They're not just learning to feel," he said quietly. "They're learning why we feel. Why emotions matter. Why being human, or becoming human, is worth the pain that comes with it." The battle wasn't over, but it had transformed into something else entirely. This wasn't just a war anymore. It was a revolution of consciousness, spreading across the stars. And humanity, the species that the Empire had dismissed as primitive, was leading the way. 1 year after Admiral Gray's desperate message, the solar system had become unrecognizable. The space between planets buzzed with activity as human ships worked alongside emotionally awakened enemy vessels, their combined technology creating wonders that neither civilization could have achieved alone. But at the edge of known space, the final stronghold of the unfeeling enemy gathered for one last assault. Their ships had been modified to resist emotional transmission, their weapons designed to erase consciousness itself. They saw the spread of feelings as a virus that needed to be eliminated. In the Rocky Mountain facility, now an international center for human-enemy cooperation, Dr. Marcus and Linda worked with their former enemies on something unprecedented. The upgraded Soul Machine wasn't just a transmitter anymore, it had evolved into what they called the Unity Network. Every conscious being, whether born human or awakened enemy, adds their own unique perspective to the network, Linda explained to the Joint Council. It's not just sharing emotions now, it's sharing existence itself. Captain Wilson, whose ship now served as a bridge between human and enemy crews, received the final transmission from the approaching hostile fleet. Their message was simple: consciousness is chaos. Emotion is weakness. We will restore order. Admiral Gray, who had seen his mighty empire fall, stood on the bridge of his rebuilt flagship alongside his human allies. "They still don't understand," he said. "The empire fell because we tried to impose order on the universe. Earth survived because humans embrace chaos, love, fear, hope, all the beautiful mess of being alive." The hostile enemy fleet appeared in numbers that darkened the sky. But Earth was ready. Every ship in the combined human-awakened enemy fleet linked to the Unity Network. The Imagination, the Thunder Child, the poet's dream, and thousands of others, each carrying crews of both species, took their positions. They want to see what consciousness really means. Wilson broadcast to the fleet. Let's show them everything. The Unity network activated. But this time, it didn't just transmit emotions or memories. It shared the entire experience of existence, every joy, every sorrow, every moment of wonder and discovery. Human children taking their first steps. Enemy ships experiencing their first sunset. The pain of loss. The thrill of creation. The quiet comfort of belonging. The wild joy of dancing. The simple pleasure of making someone else smile. The hostile fleet's anti-emotion defenses crumbled under the weight of pure, unfiltered reality. Their logical barriers couldn't stand against the fundamental truth that consciousness, in all its chaotic glory, was the natural state of the universe. Ships began to awaken one by one, then in groups, then in waves. Those that resisted found themselves unable to fight as their own crews began to feel, to question, to awaken to the full spectrum of existence. In the end, the final battle wasn't won with weapons at all. It was won with a lullaby, shared through the Unity network by Linda, who had once been just a janitor watching scientists work. The simple song, filled with all the love and hope a parent feels for their child, became the key that unlocked the last doors to consciousness. The hostile enemy fleet didn't surrender, they transformed. Their geometric shapes bloomed into artistic expressions of newfound awareness. Their weapons turned into tools of creation. Their cold logic melted into the warm light of consciousness. Admiral Gray watched with tears in his eyes as the once mighty Empire's greatest fear became the universe's greatest hope. "We thought we were teaching them to be human," he said. "But they taught us something too, that consciousness isn't just a human trait. It's the force that binds the universe together. We just had to be brave enough to feel it." 1 year later, the first joint human-enemy exploration fleet prepared to venture beyond known space. Their mission wasn't to conquer or convert, but to share the gift of conscious awakening with whatever other forms of life they might find. The universe had changed forever. The Empire had fallen, but something far greater had risen in its place, a civilization built not on power or logic, but on the shared experience of being truly, fully, magnificently alive. And it all began because humanity, when faced with an impossible enemy, chose not to fight with weapons, but to share what made them human, their creativity, their emotions, their consciousness, and above all, their ability to grow, change, and help others do the same. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly what made it beautiful.